Hi, this is a tutorial for Unity. It's not going to require any technical knowledge, but I am using a paid asset called Skinn. All my figure tutorials this month are using this tool. It's not free, but if you stay to the end of the video, I'll tell you how to save over 40% off the Unity Asset Store price. Now, a quick disclaimer, I am not the author of this asset. I don't get anything from promoting this plugin, but if you are trying to work with figures in Unity, yeah, I'm not even going to say Skinn makes it easier. I'm going to say Skinn makes it possible to work with skinned meshes in Unity. Now, there are a few other assets that have overlapping features, and supposedly you can do this through some deep scripting in Unity, but they don't make it easy. So, I think this is probably the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you're taking the figure back to Blender or Maya to edit it from scratch, and that's not what we want to do. So first I'm going to say the problem that I want to solve, and then I'm going to be showing you Adobe Fuse in this tutorial, but once we're back in Unity, this is general knowledge that you can apply to any figure system. Okay, so in Adobe Fuse, we are limited to one item from each clothing category. We get one hair model, one top, one bottom, and there's no reason for this other than it makes Fuse a little easier to use as a character generator. For me, it's annoying. If I want my character to wear 12 pairs of pants, what's it to you? But that's not how Fuse works. So Fuse doesn't allow us to combine or rename these submeshes. It depends on the original source models and how they were imported. If you have third-party clothes in Fuse, you might end up with a lot of submeshes, each with a different category name. And again, it just has to do with the way that the clothing was imported. When I download my figures from the Auto Rigger, I get an FBX file, which is really just a container for the bone hierarchy, and each of the clothing parts are included as submeshes. In Unity, these submeshes can be individually disabled to hide them, re-enabled to show them, but we can't do much else. You can't edit the meshes or reposition them. These skin meshes are locked to the figure and they move with the bones, which is probably what you want because they are skinned meshes. Now, the clothing parts take their names from the Fuse clothing categories. So hairs are named hairs. Tops will be named tops, even though this makes no sense grammatically since we get only one of each per figure. Also, sometimes the naming of the body parts is a little inconsistent. So some models, the eyes are named default. On some models, it's the eyelashes that are named default. These are just mistakes in the original source files. Once you're in Unity, you can safely rename all these submeshes. Now beware if you're using scripts that reference these submeshes, like, for instance, the one-click presets that set up your phonemes. Those might reference your body mesh by name, and renaming it is going to mess that up, obviously. So normally changing the names is fine, but what I really want to do is combine these submeshes so the model has fewer parts. I want to make costume changes easy. So for instance, I want this entire outfit to be combined together for my convenience. Now, as a similar issue, but a bigger problem, the figure also has several body parts as submeshes, and I don't want to target 4 different body meshes just to make the figure blink and talk. But if you use Fuse in Unity, you know that's exactly what we have to do. Now, this is the part where I interrupt to ask you to subscribe to my channel. It's February 2020. This month is all about editing our figures in Unity. Last week, I showed how to add clothing and save to FBX. This video is all about combining our submeshes, that's the clothing meshes, but also the various body parts. And by the way, there's no difference between body parts and clothing. It's all skinned meshes. all these figure tutorials are going to build on each other, and later this month we'll dive into blend shapes. That's all coming up, so click the bell if you want to be notified when these videos go live. Now, my body bases that you can get on itch.io, and maybe the ones you make too yourselves, have a separate submesh for the teeth. And I prefer it that way because they are easier to delete. If the character doesn't speak, or they never open their mouths, well, the teeth are just extra hidden geometry. But if a character does speak, well, now you need to synchronize the teeth, blend shapes, specifically mouth open and jaw open, with the matching blend shapes on the body. And synchronizing the teeth, it's not a big deal because I already have to synchronize the eyelashes. And unlike the teeth, which have only a few blend shapes, eyelashes have all, 40 some odd facial blend shapes packed in there. So it kind of begs the question, like, if the teeth are usually merged to the body, why aren't the eyelashes? And for that matter, why aren't the eyes? Well, it's basically all about shaders and transparency. Now, I know this seems like a tangent, but this is actually really important when it comes back to deciding how to merge these submeshes. Now, there are 3 kinds of transparency. We're going to start with brute force cutout shader, which is clean and fast because the alpha channel works like a threshold. The renderer is either all the way in or all the way out, and this kind of transparency is really useful to hide big parts of the mesh with an occlusion mask. That's like when you want to hide the body parts under clothing, so when your figure bends, there's no skin poke through. Okay. The second type of transparency is a soft transparency, where the material uses the full alpha channel to kind of fade away the mesh, and Unity calls this kind of transparency fade. We use it on hair and eyelashes with very fine texture details that need anti-aliasing. Okay, normally Unity gets its Z depth just by bouncing off the mesh, but with a fade texture, the engine has to read every pixel on the texture to know if the mesh is there or not, and depending on the opacity, it might be half there or 20% there. And that's not mentioning other texture information like what's contained in the normal maps or in your tangent information. So meanwhile, while Unity is trying to decide whether this mesh on top is should be faded away or not, it has to buffer all the pixel layers underneath. So with multiple layers of fade transparency, like what's normal with a hair cards, at some point the engine is just going to stop rendering these lower layers because you're just going to run out of memory buffer, and it's just going to take too long, and Unity is going to start taking shortcuts. Okay. The third type of transparency is for glass, and that's where you can see through a mesh, but the mesh still has an albedo color, and specular highlights, maybe environment reflections. Now this Z depth is going to be accurate because there's actually a hard mesh there in the scene. We're just seeing through it to the underlying pixels, and Unity calls this transparent. Now, if you're wondering why I'm explaining all of this, is because our characters' various submeshes might use any of these 3 types of transparency. Cutout for hiding the parts under the clothes, fade for fur and hair, transparent for eyeglasses, helmets, visors, anything with a hard transparent surface. Now, when we combine our meshes, think about which type of shader each submesh is going to need. If these meshes will share materials, then they're also going to have to share their transparency shader. Like, you don't want to mix eyeglasses and hair. Those are different types of transparency, but you could, in theory, mix like mustache, beard, and hair. That would all use the fade transparency, okay? Now, if we do have incompatible shaders we can still combine the meshes, but we just have to have multiple material slots. Following so far? Okay, let's get to our first example. I'm going to merge these clothing meshes. I'll select all the meshes I want to combine. They each have their individual textures and materials. This lets Skinn know to combine the submeshes but keep the individual materials. I'll click on Skinned Mesh Renderer Header and select Skinn, Submesh, Combine. Now my old submeshes aren't deleted, they're still here, they're just disabled. And I can easily enable and disable this combined mesh, and I don't need to keep track of multiple submeshes. Now what I do need to keep track of is its various materials. Our combined skin mesh component now shows 4 material slots. Now already I hear some of you are saying, oh, it's bad to have multiple materials. These textures should be atlas together to save draw calls. And yeah, these people are correct under certain situations, but it's not one size fits all. This is why I go into a little more explanation in my tutorials so you understand when you have to break the rules. So first of all, skinned meshes are treated differently in Unity. You're just going to find out that some optimizations that work on rigid meshes just don't work on skinned meshes. The second thing is, look at my avatar. Am I wearing shoes? Am I wearing pants? Well, the answer is yes. I made this avatar with pants and shoes because I did want to be able to show like full body shots. But the way that I present these videos, you can't see the pants. You can't see my shoes. So there's no reason to atlas textures that are not going to appear on camera. Now, a character that we see up close, like this talking head, is not necessarily the same figure that we see walking around in a top-down shooter. The rule of thumb is if you see the entire model inside the camera, then yeah, you should atlas the textures and reduce the draw calls. But if the meshes are off camera most of the time, don't take up the texture memory. If I can reduce my materials to simple shaders with small image maps or no image maps, it's going to also save on the engine. And another thing you'll hear is that it's better to have one big atlas texture than a lot of small textures. And no, again, it's not one size fits all. Big textures are terrible on mobile devices, much worse than big meshes. And you're preventing Unity from loading the texture maps as they become necessary. A big atlas has to completely unpack before it can use any of its parts. Small textures can be handled piecemeal. And also, I don't need 2K textures on my shoes, for example. But I do want more detail around the shirt and the collar because these are going to be up close to the camera. So, as always, don't trust me. Test this for yourself. Because maybe your situation is different. Maybe you have one figure for head and shoulders, another figure for walking around the terrain. Narrative figures have different levels of details from point and click figures. One size does not fit all. Okay, let's get to the last part of this tutorial. Now I'm going to combine the body meshes. And if you've been paying attention, you already know that I'm going to want multiple materials on my figure. But which materials go where? Okay, if you're adding clothing to a full body, like in last week's tutorial, you'll probably want to add a cutout shader to hide the body parts that won't show under the clothes. And this can be a low resolution occlusion mask, just a black and white, low res image. And this is just like the clothing in Fuse. It uses an occlusion mask to hide the polygons of the body underneath. So number one, I need my main body to use a cutout shader. The next material, and this is my choice. Obviously, you are free to set up your materials however you want, but what I do is I duplicate the body material to create a material for the eyes and teeth. They're both wet. They both have high specularity, so these get the same material, and there's no transparency. It's an opaque shader. So this is the material for the eyes and teeth. Now, Fuse gives us metalness and roughness maps based on our settings in the texture room, except Unity needs a smoothness map. So already we have problems, and I'm just going to show you this useless metalness map. Now, metalness is a single slider in the Fuse texture room for the entire body, and all you get in this map is a big RGB texture with a single gray color. So obviously this map is useless for the body. It has a single pixel of information in it. So I'm just going to use the slider on the Unity shader instead. It's the same thing. The other problem is this roughness map. So in theory, this should be inverted black to white to make a smoothness map, or, you know, I guess we could just invert our settings in the Fuse texture room, but I'm not going to do that either. This map sucks. It's always the same noise pattern applied on every Fuse figure, and it applies the noise even on top of the eyebrows. Unity doesn't even display this map very well anyway. I don't know if there's just not enough contrast, but you know, there is some light and dark information here, but it all just kind of averages out to mush with that noise on top. So just don't use this map. Throw it away along with that one color metalness map. Okay, so I've got two materials, body and eye teeth. They share textures, but they have different specular settings, so it still counts as two materials. That leaves us with the eyelashes. So, you've been following along. What do you think? Should the eyelashes get a third material for fade transparency, or should I just use the same cutout shader as my skin on the body? And ironically, someone just asked me about this in the forums. Eyelashes. Okay, so cutout looks blocky. Fade, I feel like I can't even see most of the time. So I don't know the right answer. I also feel like this is a character, if this is going to be someone I'm serious about, I need to come up with better eyelashes, either in the textures or like an add-on mesh, like false eyelashes. All right, for now I'm just going to duplicate the body material. I'm going to set the lashes shader to fade and add them to the lashes. So if you're keeping score, I have 4 submeshes with 3 materials selected. I'm using Skinn, submeshes, combine, and I end up with 1 combined mesh with 3 material slots. Now, the magic moment is the blend shapes on our combined mesh, which I haven't touched at all because Skinn is handling it for me. So Skinn has combined all the duplicate channels by name and merged them to common sliders that sets both the body and the eyelashes and also the teeth. And here is my tongue blend shape. So combining submeshes is not creating new blend shapes. These blend shapes were already on the submeshes, but Skinn has merged the controls on this combined mesh so they're easier to use. Now, up here, notice nothing got destroyed. My original meshes are still here in the scene. They've just been disabled. And, of course, my original model is still here in the import folder. At this point, I can delete the old submeshes and save this new figure as a prefab or as a Unity FBX like I showed in the last video. Now, one last trick with Skinn. I'm going to use the same command, but this time I will split apart the submesh we just created. With the combined mesh selected, click on Skinn, submesh, split, and my combined mesh is now disabled, and I have a new sub meshes under the subcategory, and they're each skin to the bones. Nothing got destroyed, and combining sub meshes is reversible. All right, we've come to the end of another video. I promised to share a way to buy Skinn at a 40% discount over the Unity Asset Store price, and the secret is go buy it on itch.io, where it's currently $25 cheaper. Yeah, that's it. There's no discount code, or I don't have a voucher offer or anything. I'm just go to a different store and buy it there. It's the same thing. Now, I'm going to be using Skinn in more tutorials this month as we take control of our figures in Unity. We're going to edit our blend shapes by combining them and adding new ones from meshes. Then we'll transfer those blend shapes from our figure into the clothing. So subscribe and hit the bell for notifications when these videos go live. Leave me a comment and hit the like button if you think this tutorial might help someone else out. I'll be back in a few days with another video, so have a great week and keep creating. This is Cutscene Artist. I'll see you next time.